Al Jazeera Podcasts.
We are really suffering from a lack of legal framework that adequately protects the rights of women and children.
Iraq's recent amendments to the personal status law has people talking across the country. Critics warn this could be a step backwards for women's rights, raising concerns about marriage, divorce, and child custody laws. I want to know how it could impact women and girls across Iraq. I'm Samantha Johnson, and this is Now You Know, a safe space where we go all in on stories about women, so by the end of each episode, you can say, now I know. Sherri Kraham Talabany is the president and executive director of SEED, an organisation in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. She's seen firsthand how the country's laws and culture have impacted the lives of women and girls over the past 25 years. So, Sherri, thank you so much for joining us on Now You Know.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So, in January of this year, the Iraqi government amended the personal status law. What's changed for women and girls?
So this personal status law governs matters of the family, so marriage, custody, inheritance, and it has a huge impact on women and children's rights. The amendments that they adopted rolled back the protection of rights and access to the courts because it relegated matters like marriage and custody to the purview of the religious codes. And so that further takes the rights of women and children outside the purview and the oversight of the courts, strips their authority in many ways, and increases the potential for child rights to be abused. So for children to be married underage, for women to have more out-of-court marriages, which decreases their access to justice and enforcement of different things in court.
And when we're talking about the ages, what age are we talking about here? Like how young?
So there was a huge outcry to a reaction to these amendments. And so broad coalitions were developed, and we did get some concessions. One of the concessions that we achieved was that the amendment says the marriage age of Iraq will be honored, which is 18, 15 with parents' consent. But what's happening in reality is something different, because once you take it outside the court to issue the marriage certificate and you put it in the religious services, then we don't know what age girls and boys will be married. So what's happening now is a very high rate of early marriage. We see 7% of girls already being married under 15 and 28% being married under 18. So we already have a high rate of child marriage. And by taking the courts out of the picture, we fear that this will be exacerbated. And this is in a country with few protections for children.
So if I'm correct, there was already a chance of, let's say, child marriages, but because of the amendment, we might see an increase in child marriages.
Yeah, 35% of marriages are children under 18. So we already have a high rate of early marriage and forced marriage. And we don't know what will happen if more marriages go into the religious sector by mullahs outside the court. And we think that that marriage rate will go up. But it's also a problem for women when they have out-of-court marriages. So we have many women that come to us for legal services. They are facing abuse in their family and they want a divorce. And we cannot achieve a divorce easily for them because they don't have a marriage certificate.
Did you see this coming?
Unfortunately, we did see it coming because this has been a push in Iraq since the law was created in 1959. It was a very progressive law, especially for the Middle East, to have people's rights, women's rights, children's rights preserved in a law or documented and codified in a law. But since that point, there has always been a move against it to bring these matters outside of the court system, outside of the rule of law, and into the purview of religious codes. So we saw it in 1959 when the law was enacted. We saw it again in 2004 when we had a change in regime and the Constitution of Iraq was created. These amendments were disapproved. We saw it again in 2016. So this has been brewing for many, many years, and there's a movement to make the religious codes guide these personal status matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you just said, you could see this coming. I'm intrigued to know how this affects your work. As I said in the intro, your organization, SEED, promotes social, educational, and economic development. What else does the organization do?
Well, we're a women-led local NGO registered in Kurdistan, Iraq, and we just completed our 10th year. So for the last decade, we focused on protecting, empowering, and supporting survivors of violence and those at risk. And we do that through individual services to women, children, men, to families. We do that through community engagement, empowering communities, supporting communities, and we also work at the institutional level. So we're working with government to build better laws, better systems, improving capacity of those working to protect vulnerable people. So SEED has been working to build protections and to strengthen the well-being so that everybody has a future where they can thrive in a country that has faced recurrent conflict for, the last 60 years. So we, in our future programming, we're focused on strengthening protections, but also working with the society more broadly to ensure that they're empowered to live a future where they can thrive. Everybody's treated equally and everybody has access to their rights.
And how can you do that now that there's been amendments to the personal status law?
So this makes things much more complicated and more challenging. The story has yet to be told. We don't know the full impact of this. One of the interesting things about this is they're referring to the Jafari Religious Code. Well, the Jafari Religious Code is not written. So the law requires a writing of the code, of the religious code that is referred to in the amendment. And we don't know if that will even happen. But that will give us more visibility as to the rights and the rules enshrined in the Jafari Code. So we're looking forward to that moment that code is put forward and Parliament gets to look at that code to see where the next battle is and to see how we can continue to advocate for people's rights. But we also have to work with all parts of society.
And how do you do that? How do you get everyone working on the same page, so to speak?
I want to say this amendment was done in a backdrop of a lack of necessary protections. We are really suffering from a lack of legal framework that adequately protects the rights of women and children. So legal legislation, regulations, institutions, trained personnel, we are suffering from, protections for marginalized groups like women, like children, like religious minorities. And so we continue our work to strengthen those regulations and legislations. I have to say, I was really inspired by the huge coalition that was formed to oppose this amendment. So women and men, NGOs, judges, lawyers, political parties, parliamentarians from all across Iraq came together. We're based in the Kurdistan region, and this law applies to federal Iraq. It doesn't even apply to the Kurdistan region. But we know that this will impact women and children in other parts of Iraq, and they will come seeking access to justice in our courts because the borders are light and people will move all around Iraq. So we were really inspired by this huge coalition that worked really effectively. And we spoke as one voice to oppose these amendments. And we did get some concessions. So, civil society was engaged, was effective and really fought for the rights of the population. So that was quite inspiring. So that can guide our work going ahead.
Can you see any other changes in the future?
Well, Again, we have to look at this amendment as part of a very problematic and worrisome rollback of human rights that we're seeing, a rollback of women's rights and protections and children's rights. So we envision that we are going to see more of this, and we have to continue to push on these issues. And it has to be homegrown. And it has to come from the people of the country to oppose this and to advocate for strengthened protections for social protection by the state. I mean, what this law does is push away the good governance of the state to engage in matters of social protection and human development. So we have to push against this. We don't expect that this will be the one and only move. We expect other moves. We've been working for a child rights law in federal Iraq for quite a long time, and we're going to continue to push for that. We've been pushing for a domestic violence law, and we're going to continue to push because almost 50% of women face physical or sexual violence in their home. So we have a pervasive problem. We have a rollback of laws and protections when we actually have the need to move further and to strengthen all of these protections.
Before we continue with today's show, I wanted to talk to you about Hindsight, a dramatized history show from Al Jazeera Podcasts. We have season 7 beginning on Wednesday, May the 7th. But in the meantime, you can catch up with season 6 right here on the Al Jazeera YouTube podcast tab and listen to all the other seasons on your favorite podcast app. Here's a preview of season 7.
I want to sing, Hassan. That's all I want.
Hindsight, a dramatized history podcast from Al Jazeera.
Have you seen what the British have done? They have stabbed us in the back.
I'm your narrator, Charles Dance. In season 7, we meet people from the Arab world, including dynastic leaders.
I was in my early 20s and running Egypt.
Under my rule, Muslims will retake our lands from foreign invaders.
And artists, like the famed French-Algerian writer Albert Camus.
There is something deeply absurd about the search for meaning.
At that moment, I was no longer Amal al-Atrash. I became Asmahan.
Egypt's sisters in crime.
We were mere spectators who provided food and drinks.
We're not killers.
You've heard of them.
My name is pronounced Salah ad-Din.
I am Shagarat ad-Dur, Sultana of Egypt.
Now it's time to hear from them.
You may call me Faisal.
My name is Raya Ali Hammam.
I am Skin Ali Hammam.
Hindsight, a dramatized history podcast from Al Jazeera. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's dig in a little bit into the political system. Now, I understand that Iraq has a multi-party political system and it represents the country. We're talking Shia, Sunni, and the Kurdish population. How difficult was it to get this pushed through?
So you raise a really important point, which was the way that this law was passed was extremely problematic. So this law was opposed by a broad segment of society, but when they put it forward to the Council of Ministers and to the Parliament for approval, they packaged it up with 3 other laws. And so you either voted for the issues that you care about, or you lose what you've been pushing for. So they had these 3 bills together. So that was extremely problematic. I would say that we were able to get some concessions, like the statement that the marriage age of Iraq hasn't changed. Another concession, there was an aim to remove custody rights for women to parent their children in cases of divorce. And we all know that when children are raised by their mothers, they have a better chance of healthy development. So previously, the personal status law said that mothers have the right to parent their children, and mothers can retain custody until the child is an adult, or 15, I think it was the previous age. So we were able to get a concession moving that to age 7. So mothers have the right to parent their children to age 7. What happens in the courts, what happens in the religious sphere, we don't know. And you see this everywhere. What happens in law and what happens in practice are two different things. In reality, it's very hard for women to access justice in the courts. And so when a woman files for divorce, she often loses custody of her children. And that's in reality because she either doesn't have an income, or she doesn't have a lawyer, or she can't make the court date. She doesn't even have transportation to get to the court to fight for her rights. So in reality, women often lose custody. And so women here in Iraq often aren't able to enforce their safety in a court of law or ask for a divorce because they will lose their children. And so we really have to work. You asked a question earlier. I'm not sure I answered it about what are we doing? Well, we have to work with all of society. We have to work with men and boys about their views about violence, about how their views about family harmony, about what they want to see in their future for how a marriage works, and to see a bit more equality in the marriage and less violence in the marriage. Women's rights and children's rights being respected doesn't mean that men are worse off. We have to show them that they're actually going to be better off, because when women have the right to go to work, right, the income of the family goes up. They're able to contribute to the economy. When women have a role in family decision making, all the evidence around the world shows that kids are healthier and kids have access to better education when mothers are more educated, when mothers have their rights respected. And we know about the impact of children growing up in families with violence, right? They have lower educational outcomes. They have more mental health issues. And girls that are watching their mothers being abused become future victims, and boys that watch abuse also become future perpetrators. So reducing violence in the family is just creating a much healthier and happier society. We feel as a human rights organization, as a development organization, that it's critical to the future development of the country that we move towards more rule of law and better protections for all.
Could you just tell me where around the country these laws are being enforced?
So the Personal Status Law of 1959 applies everywhere. When the regime changed, when Saddam Hussein was removed from power and we moved towards a democratically elected government in 2004, there was a new constitution created, and that applies to everybody in the country. But that constitution also said that you can have an autonomous region with its own parliament. And that's what we have in the Kurdistan region. So we have 4 governorates, and we have our own parliament, and we have our own prime minister and council of ministers. So laws that existed prior to 2004, they still apply in the Kurdistan region. And the Kurdistan region has its own right to enact laws. So we're working as SEED with 2 parliaments. We work on federal laws that apply to federal Iraq. And we also work on laws and policies that just apply to the Kurdistan region. So in Kurdistan, this amendment does not apply. However, when you have a population that's moving all around, we also work on many, many cases of child marriage or of forced marriage or of marriage outside the court system that come to the Kurdistan region and access our courts to try to enforce their rights. So basically, the impact will be felt everywhere. And right now we have a bit of confusion because the law was passed, as you said, around in January, and the Jaffery Code hasn't been issued. So it's already problematic and challenging for the courts to govern on issues where the code that they're talking about, the religious code that they're talking about, hasn't even been published or issued. And there may even be disagreement about what the Jaffery Code actually says or what it means or what the parameters are.
Where do you go from here? I mean, how do you go on to protect young girls, women in Iraq?
Yeah, so where we are right now in Iraq, we've had a shift. Following the ISIS crisis, we were in a humanitarian crisis from 2014, and an internationally led response. UN was here, donors were here. Now we're moving towards a development phase where, Iraq is a wealthy country, so we must focus on the government serving the needs of its population, spending its money on social issues, on education, on social protections and human development. So, seed our approach in this next development phase is to continue to provide services to those in need, but to really focus on engaging communities in their own development, empowering them with the knowledge and the tools and the skills that they need to thrive. And then working to continue to support the Kurdistan and Iraq government to adopt the right laws, the policies, to strengthen institutions that really are accountable to the population and serve the population. And that's what we're committed to doing. And we like to work in coalitions with other organizations because together we can achieve more. We all have different beliefs, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different ethnic groups, different religions, but that we come together for the common good and that we see a future where everybody can thrive.
Is there any hope of seeing this law being amended in the future?
We can always work to address that. There are different ways that we can try to strengthen child and women's rights. I don't know if an amendment is possible again, but I do think the next phase is looking at the codes, the religious codes that are written, and also ensuring that Kurdistan and Iraq, so we're working at the federal and the regional level to advocate for a child rights law. I think one of the reasons why this amendment was so disastrous is because it's in an environment where we're lacking these protections in general. So we have to work towards, again, at that institutional and legislative level, but we have to also work with the community and the society about how they feel about marrying their children. And the benefit of their children. So we have to work at all of these different levels if we want to see change.
Sherri, it's clear that this law will have a huge impact on women and girls across Iraq. And if you want to bring men and young boys into the conversation, it will impact them too. But despite the challenges, it seems like there's hope. So thank you for coming on to Now You Know, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, I'm hopeful because I'm inspired by the people of this country that want to see a brighter future. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the issues that we're grappling with. Thank you.
I hope this conversation has brought some clarity to the significance of the changes in Iraq's personal status law and the future of women's rights in the country. Please share your thoughts, and if you have some stories you'd like for us to explore on Now You Know, let us know in the comments. Thank you, and see you again next week.